In the heart of South America, where the forest does not drip with moisture but shimmers with heat, there stretches a wilderness that pulses not with lushness, but with fire-hardened resolve, a landscape where trees burn and regrow in a single lifetime, where roots drink from stone, and where life, instead of flourishing in abundance, survives by subtraction. This is the Cerrado, a place that humbles the imagination, a biome so vast and rich it is often called the inverted forest, where 80% of the biomass lies hidden beneath the surface, buried in a labyrinth of roots that reach down like searching fingers, clutching water from an earth that forgets to rain. Here, life does not surge upward in flamboyant display. It waits, endures, listens for distant thunder, and grows in silence. And yet, despite its muted palette and subtle textures, the Cerrado holds more biodiversity per acre than almost any grassland on Earth. A quiet contradiction that defies every expectation of what a dry forest should be. At first glance, it appears open, exposed, almost vulnerable. Crooked trees spaced like wary travelers, their bark thick and scarred, their crowns sparse against an infinite sky. Grasses crisped by fire, scattered rocks radiating heat. But beneath this apparent fragility lies one of the most ancient and complex ecological systems on the continent, older than the Amazon, older than the Andes, a relic of evolutionary strategies perfected over 40 million years. The air is not humid, it crackles. Winds sweep over the plateau like whispers of old storms, curling through twisted trunks of Ipe and Pau Santo, stirring the dusty scent of iron-rich soil and the subtle perfume of wildflowers that bloom not for beauty, but to seduce bees with ultraviolet signals human eyes will never see. It is in these unassuming margins that giants hide not in size, always, but in tenacity, in adaptation, in mythic endurance. And though most travelers overlook them, those who wait, who walk softly and stay silent, will see the shadows begin to move. A giant anteater appears like a whisper rising from the ground, its coarse fur trailing like banners behind it, claws clicking softly as it crosses a red dirt trail in search of a termite mound left untouched by the last burn. Its stride is deliberate, each step measured against an invisible map of memory and muscle, one that spans kilometers of territory, shaped not by fences but by scent trails, distant thunder, and the low hum of insect life. Nearby, a tapir slips through the riparian corridor like a ghost, its body built like a barrel, but moving with the grace of something ancient and aquatic. It knows the path between waterholes better than any map could show, and it vanishes before the human eye has time to register its full form. The forest canopy is low, often no more than 5 meters high. But its ecological height is staggering, each tree species supporting its own network of birds, insects, epiphytes, and fungi, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth. And in the dry season, when leaves fall and flowers bloom in bursts of magenta and gold, the forest becomes a reverse mosaic color blooming in drought, life rising from absence. In one corner of the Cerrado rupestre, rocky Cerrado, a subregion defined by exposed stone and shallow soil. A hummingbird hovers, wings invisible, drinking from a bromeliad clinging to quartz. Its heart beats 1,200 times per minute, a pulse that would kill a larger creature. But in this scaled-down storm of feathers and focus, the impossible becomes ordinary. A few meters away, buried beneath leaf litter, a burrowing owl stares upward, motionless, waiting for dusk to release her from the grip of heat. Her gaze is ancient and calculating. She sees not just the grasshopper that moves too soon, but the shifting patterns of the ecosystem itself. And her calls, when they come, echo across the savannah like a question too old to answer. The Cerrado does not roar like a jungle, nor whisper like a desert. It hums. A low, continuous resonance made from the wings of cicadas, the footfall of capybaras, the distant bark of a maned wolf, each note carried by wind and branch, woven into a song that only grows clearer the longer one listens. And if one stays long enough to let the eyes adjust to ochre tones, long enough to feel the rhythm beneath the stillness, one begins to see that this is not a place of lack, but of intricate decisions, where every movement is calculated, every flowering timed to a single storm, and every survival an act of grace against impossible odds. In the rainy season, when storms roll in from the Amazon and crack the sky with sudden violence, the Cerrado transforms almost overnight. Termites swarm in the millions, their synchronized emergence feeding a chain of predators from frogs to foxes to raptors. Seeds germinate en masse, triggered by fire or moisture or a brief drop in temperature, and flowers open to greet a world that only exists for a few short weeks before the sun burns it back to dust. And yet, in this sudden abundance, there is no excess. Every burst of life is tethered to a tightly drawn web of dependencies. A single missed pollination, a poorly timed bloom, and the cycle falters. There is no waste here, no mercy, and no redundancy. Somewhere, hidden beneath a lobera bush, a giant armadillo dozes, its armored body curled like a relic from another age. It may dig more soil in one night than a human backhoe does in an hour, and in doing so, it aerates the land, brings nutrients to the surface, and creates microhabitats used by dozens of smaller creatures who follow in its wake. It is not a charismatic icon. It is not easy to see, but it is essential. And so are the thousands of other invisible engineers, ants who farm fungi, birds who eat and disperse precisely, trees whose roots collaborate with underground fungi in a silent barter of sugar and minerals. The Cerrado is not built by kings or queens. It is built by tiny things, working together. The balance is delicate. The system robust until disrupted. Already, the fires grow hotter. The rains shift. And vast sections of this forest are being carved into monoculture fields that do not bloom in drought, do not feed insects, do not listen to the thunder. Yet still, the Cerrado breathes. Still, it waits. Still, it fights not with teeth, but with timing. Not with brute force, but with strategies older than names. And as twilight falls and the savannah turns to shadow, a single question floats above the heat like dust caught in a shaft of dying light. What kind of intelligence is required not just to survive in a place like this, but to build it, live by it, and never break it? Heat radiates upward in invisible sheets as the midday sun pins the land beneath its glare, casting no shadow wide enough for relief. This is the hour when survival depends not on strength, but on strategy, when the animals of the Cerrado must move with intention, or not at all. The savannah holds its breath. Grasses browned by sun and singed by past fires quiver with the memory of movement. But the predators, those shaped by scarcity and honed by patience, are already awake, already watching. Here, in the endless grasslands of the Cerrado sensu stricto, a subregion defined by its tall grasses and scattered trees, the balance between hunter and hunted sharpens like a blade. A pampas fox creeps along the edge of visibility, its grey coat blending with the dusty earth, its paws silent, its senses stretched wide across the landscape. Every movement is deliberate, each step a calculation, pause, scent, listen, because out here a mistake means hunger, and hunger is not a passing discomfort, but a growing erasure. The fox's target today, an unsuspecting rodent beneath the cover of a termite mound's long shadow, where temperatures drop by mere degrees, but those degrees matter. The chase, when it comes, is not theatrical, it is swift, brutal, over in seconds. But behind that moment of speed lie hours of stillness, study, and spatial memory. Elsewhere, the maned wolf, tall, solitary, spectral, emerges from the golden grass like a mirage given form. Its legs, impossibly long, allow it to glide above the grass line, ears swiveling to catch the faintest rustle. Though it resembles a fox on stilts, the maned wolf is no close cousin to any other canine. It is its own branch, evolutionary distinct, an echo of a lineage that once roamed far beyond the continent. It hunts alone, walks alone, and often eats what other predators ignore: fruits, insects, birds startled from thickets. And yet, it is revered not only for its elegance, but for its role as a seed disperser, its scat spreading the Cerrado's precious lobera fruit, the wolf apple, whose seeds germinate best after passing through its gut. Even predators, here, are part gardeners. But not all action takes place on four legs. Some unfolds beneath, where the ground is alive with conflict and coordination. The leafcutter ant, whose empire may contain millions of individuals, forages in synchronized streams, each ant bearing a green shard many times its size. They are not eating the leaves, they are feeding them to a subterranean fungus, cultivated in vast chambers and tended like crops. Above, their movements seem mechanical. Below, their society rivals human cities in complexity. They face constant threat anteaters, flooding rains, rival colonies, but their cohesion is what sustains them. Not one ant, but all ants. A lesson in strength by surrendering to the collective. In contrast, the giant anteater is a solitary specialist, long claws folded like weapons of a sleeping warrior, its narrow snout trembling as it senses vibrations within the mound. With a single tear, it splits the wall of dirt, and with a tongue, like a whip, begins to feed, flicking in and out up to 150 times per minute. It will not stay long. Just minutes. Because while the termites rebuild, others watch. The Jaguar watches. Seldom seen, but ever present, the jaguar in the Cerrado is smaller than its rainforest kin. Its muscles dense with the memory of longer chases, its jaws honed to crack turtle shells, caiman skulls, even armored armadillos. She stalks the gallery forest, lining the river's edge, where the vegetation thickens just enough for cover, where prey comes to drink and sometimes forgets to look up. But she never forgets. She has survived droughts, fires, the slow march of soy fields. Every step she takes is silent, and when she vanishes into the reeds, it is as if the forest breathes again. Here, survival is not a story of the fittest in the raw sense of power, but the most attuned, those able to read the forest's pauses, anticipate the rhythms of rainfall and bloom, move only when movement will be rewarded. Even the capybara, the world's largest rodent with its docile eyes and barrel chest, is a study in this wisdom. It grazes near water, but always in groups, its safety in numbers, its trust placed in communal vigilance. A sharp whistle from one, and the entire herd slips into the river like shadows. Beneath their stillness lies an ancient awareness. Some predators they know do not roar or leap. Some float, motionless, until the moment is right. Such is the caiman, whose nostrils break the surface like punctuation in a story without words. It waits near muddy banks where birds come to drink sunbitterns and siriemas, distracted by song or thirst. But the caiman does not sing. Its hunger is the silence between heartbeats. And when it strikes, it is not with malice, but with precision, because to waste energy in this ecosystem is to gamble with extinction. And so, the Cerrado's daily rhythm unfolds like a dance choreographed by thirst, by heat, by necessity. Each step, each gesture, whether of pursuit or evasion, is a refinement of instinct carried across generations. The black-masked titi monkey, high in the gallery trees, communicates in pairs with delicate vocal duets that affirm bonds and mark territory. Its song is soft but persistent, echoing the truth that, even here, among so much dryness and danger, connection matters. This is not a place for the impulsive, nor the arrogant. It rewards only those who listen, who learn, who remember the paths of shade between morning and noon. And as the sun tilts westward and the shadows lengthen across termite mounds and dust trails, the forest exhales, its creatures retreating, its grasses hissing in the breeze like old secrets being stirred. Because when survival is an equation written in fire and drought, in predators and scarcity, only those who solve it again and again each day, each season, are allowed to remain part of the story. And every step, every breath, every narrow escape or successful strike is another line added to a script older than time. The script of instinct, of survival, of life that refuses to yield. In the hush of early morning, when the air still clings to the night's last cool breath and the grasses glisten with dew not yet burned away, the Cerrado begins to stir, but not always as it seems. This is the hour of secrets, of movements so subtle they vanish behind a blade of grass, of lives unfolding not in the open, but in the folds and fractures of the landscape. For while the surface tells one story, the truth of this dry forest lies deeper in camouflage, mimicry, illusion, and the quiet theatre of hidden behaviors. Beneath the cover of low shrubs and thorny brush, a red-legged Cerrado stalks with the slow grace of a ballet dancer, every step measured, every feather in perfect stillness. To the untrained eye, it is simply a bird, tall, elegant, aloof. But to the insects hiding in the underbrush, to the small reptiles warming on stones, it is a harbinger of terror. The Cerrado is no passive forager. It is a cunning hunter that uses its beak not only to strike, but to lift, flip, and smash. Should it catch a lizard, it will hurl it against a rock in precise, repeated arcs until the body stills a brutal intelligence masked by feathers and poise. In the silent moments that follow, it swallows its prize whole and moves on, as if the violence had never happened. Higher in the canopy of a dry forest patch, a marmoset peers through tangled branches, its fur like dusted charcoal, its eyes a flash of curiosity and calculation. Though tiny, it navigates the vertical world with practiced ease, leaping from limb to limb, stopping only to nibble at a strange secretion oozing from a gouged tree. This is no random bite. The marmoset is a gouger, deliberately cutting into bark to harvest tree sap, a sugar-rich lifeline in a landscape where fruit comes and goes with the rains. The sap not only nourishes, it shapes their social structure. Dominant individuals control the choicest feeding sites, subordinates wait their turn, and hierarchy is written not in violence, but in patience. It is an economy of sugar and status, invisible to most, but central to their survival. Down in the red soil, a false coral snake glides beneath dry leaves, its scales gleaming with bands of black, red, and cream. A warning or a lie? To predators, this mimic appears dangerous, echoing the coloration of the true coral snake, whose venom is potent enough to end lives. But the false coral is harmless, its defense purely psychological, a lesson written not in claws or venom, but in the power of suggestion. In the Cerrado, deception is not a flaw, it is a strategy, an evolutionary poem recited in color and shadow. And then there is the armadillo, armored, ancient, and often unseen, not the lumbering stereotype, but the nimble, nocturnal, three-banded species that rolls into a perfect sphere when threatened. It forages with a methodical rhythm, nose to ground, listening for insects beneath the surface. When it senses movement, it digs with astonishing speed, sending dirt in jets behind it, disappearing into a self-made world. Its shell is not merely protection, it is memory made physical, an echo of a time when giant ground sloths and saber-tooths walked this land. And still it persists, a quiet survivor in a forest where visibility can be fatal. But perhaps the most mystifying of all is the firefly, not in its glow, which is beautiful, but in the trap it sets. Among the grasses, females of some species mimic the flash pattern of other firefly species, not to attract mates, but to lure them in, only to kill and consume them. It is a deadly masquerade, a light show with lethal intent, revealing a darker intelligence behind the softest glimmers. What seems a beacon of connection is, at times, a predator's deceit. Beauty here does not always signal safety. Throughout these interactions, a recurring truth emerges. The Cerrado is not simply about what is visible. It is a forest defined by what it withholds, by behaviors evolved not for spectacle, but for survival. The tapiti, a small, forest-dwelling rabbit, births her young in shallow depressions hidden beneath thickets. She returns only briefly, just a few minutes each night, to avoid drawing predators to the nest. Her absence is an act of love. Her stillness, a shield. In this landscape, even the maternal bond is shaped by the necessity of evasion. Among the termite mounds, ancient, towering structures that dot the savannah like earthen cities, lives another architect of secrecy. The giant earthworm, rarely seen, but spanning over a meter in length, coiling through soil like a muscle of the earth itself. It feeds on decaying organic matter, turning death into fertility, tunneling unseen but essential pathways for roots and rain. Without it, the soil would harden, the plants would falter, the chain of life would thin. And yet, it lives entirely in shadow, its existence felt more than observed. A ghost of nutrition. A hidden engineer. Even the trees participate in the Cerrado's quiet theatre. Some species, like the picky, have bark that peels in long strips, an adaptation not of vanity, but of defense. By shedding bark, the tree reduces the risk of parasite infestation, fire damage, and fungal growth. Its fruit, hard-shelled and spiked, is prized by birds, monkeys, and humans alike. But its oil-rich seeds can only be accessed through a careful and sometimes painful process, reinforcing the Cerrado's lesson again and again. Reward here is earned, not offered. In this world, the most astonishing behaviors are not loud. They are veiled in stillness, masked in mimicry, encoded in rituals of movement and pause. They are the behaviors that elude even the sharpest human gaze, the ones that took decades of observation to decode, that still baffle biologists and humble the overconfident. For every jaguar paw print and hawk's scream, there are 10 stories we've yet to witness, 10 acts playing out in the silence between heartbeats. Perhaps the most profound reflection is this. What if the greatest struggles and triumphs of life are not those we see, but those we never notice? What if the real battle is not for dominance or display, but for invisibility, for the chance to continue unbothered, unremarked, and therefore untouched? In the wild heart of the Cerrado, the greatest truths are often the quietest ones. And if we wish to understand this place, we must not just look, we must learn to see. When the sky burns white with heat and the ground trembles with thirst, the Cerrado reveals its most merciless face, an expanse of fire-hardened soil, cracked like ancient pottery, and trees that bend not from wind, but from the burden of survival. This is a land of extremes, where water becomes sacred, shade becomes salvation, and to live through the dry season is not merely endurance, it is a test written in flesh and ash. Everything that breathes here is etched with adaptation, shaped not by gentleness, but by a relentlessness that knows no reprieve. The sun does not simply rise, it dominates. From late May through September, rain vanishes almost entirely, and with it goes the luxury of abundance. Pools dry into dustpans, rivers shrink into silent threads, and the grasses, once verdant, wither to a brittle yellow. In this exposed world, animals must become ghosts, masters of conservation, movement, and timing. A capuchin monkey, its face drawn and lean, climbs carefully through the thin canopy, scanning each limb not just for fruit, but for tiny water pockets trapped in bromeliads, in hollows, in forgotten crevices. Its fingers probe with delicate desperation, and when it finds a sip mere drops, it drinks as if quenching the whole of its being. But it is not thirst alone that threatens. Fire, natural and human-made, sweeps across the Cerrado like a scythe, fast and unpredictable, consuming everything that cannot retreat beneath the soil or take to the skies. For some species, fire is an ending. For others, it is a strange ally. The fire-adapted grasses, Andropogon, Echinolina, rise again within days, their roots untouched, their seeds awakened by the very flames that destroyed their neighbors. The twisted trees, thick-barked and gnarled, carry fire scars like old medals, their wood blackened but alive. These species do not avoid fire, they remember it, building resilience into their biology, teaching a paradox only nature could write, that destruction, when timed and tempered, may bring renewal. But not all is rebirth. For the maned wolf, elusive, long-legged and solitary, the dry season brings danger that no adaptation can fully outrun. As prey species thin and waterholes disappear, its range expands, and with it, the risk of venturing too close to roads, to fences, to the ever-encroaching edge of civilization. The maned wolf does not howl, it vocalizes in low barks that echo hauntingly across the plains, a sound too lonely to be mistaken for dominance, too fragile to suggest control. Its survival is not guaranteed, not anymore. Far below the surface, the giant anteater feels the heat, not in thirst, but in time. Its day shortens with each rising temperature, for the sun is a punishment it cannot bear. With a tongue that flicks 160 times per minute and claws sharp enough to fend off jaguars, it is a creature built for precision, but not for excess. It feeds in dawn's light and dusk's hush, retreating quickly into burrows or shaded scrapes where its own fur becomes a blanket. One missed cue, 1 hour too late, and it risks collapse from heat it cannot shed. Among the red termite mounds, those hardened monuments to endurance, a parallel crisis brews. During the dry months, competition for food inside these fortresses intensifies. Worker termites begin rationing movement, creating sealed chambers to trap moisture, adjusting cast responsibilities to minimize collapse. It is a biological bureaucracy, a crisis management system older than cities. And yet, even here, hunger creeps in. Predators like the lesser anteater or lizards capable of detecting vibrations beneath the surface become surgical intruders, slicing into the ecosystem's core. Each raid threatens not just the individuals consumed, but the entire fragile architecture of the colony. And then there is the unseen toll. The egg-laden mother, her body taxed by scarcity. The pollinators, like solitary bees and butterflies, whose flight range narrows as flowers become scarce. The fruits that fall unripened, wasted offerings to a soil too dry to receive them. The dry season is not one event. It is a cascade, a long unraveling that tests every link in the chain of life. Yet, within this adversity, brilliance blooms not in comfort, but in audacity. The Katinga parrot, a splash of green and gold, finds water in cactus flesh, slicing the spiny skin with surgical beaks, never once swallowing a needle. The rock cavy, a shy rodent of outcrops and stone piles, stores fat in its tail to withstand weeks without true nourishment. The tapir, ancient and lumbering, shifts its activity to the edge of darkness, navigating by scent, always seeking the nearest spring, mapping memory through generations. Their survival is a choreography of scarcity, a whispered wisdom passed not through genes alone, but through attention, through learned restraint. This is not the balance of lushness, but of scarcity, the kind of balance that tilts with a single misstep. And in recent decades, that misstep has come not from within, but from above. Climate patterns warp. Rains arrive too late, or in bursts too violent to nourish. Fires started for agriculture escape their boundaries. Deforestation fractures migration paths. The Cerrado, once accustomed to hardship, now faces stressors beyond its evolutionary script. But still, life clings. A frog hibernates beneath the clay, encased in a self-made cocoon of mucus, waiting not for hours or days, but for months, until the first true rain arrives. Then it bursts forth in ecstatic song, calling for a mate with urgency and joy, a ritual unchanged for millennia. In that song lies everything: hope, persistence, the refusal to vanish quietly. What human world mirrors this? Perhaps a refugee's resilience, or the improvisation of those living in drought-stricken regions, people who turn scarcity into structure, who grow gardens from dust, who learn to walk farther, carry more, waste nothing. The Cerrado, in this light, is not so different. It survives because it must. It adapts because it has no choice. Its hardship is real, and in that realism is a raw, unvarnished kind of beauty. And so the question returns, not as judgment, but as echo: how much more can it bear? How many more fires? How many more weeks without rain? How many more roads dissecting its silence before the wild rhythm frays? The Cerrado's strength is not infinite, but its will to endure that still burns bright. Beneath the scattered canopy, where the light filters through in trembling waves and the soil hums with unseen life, there lies a truth as ancient as the land itself: nothing in the Cerrado exists alone. Every wingbeat, every seed fall, every rustle of leaf or pulse of breath is part of a delicate, sprawling conversation, written not in words but in touch, scent, vibration, and timing. This is an ecosystem built not on isolation, but on intimacy, a vast biological network where the survival of one species often hinges upon the invisible labor of another.
It's a big meal for these small.
High in the branches of a curving pautera tree, the helmeted mannequin performs his ritual, a blur of red and black, his wings snapping like castanets as he dances across a sunlit branch, each move choreographed, rehearsed, precise. But his show is not merely display, it is a signal in a wider language, one that speaks to female choice, to reproductive timing, and, indirectly, to the ripening of fruit trees whose seeds these birds later disperse across the savannah. Without the mannequin, certain trees would vanish from distant clearings. Without those trees, shade, nesting hollows, even soil stability would unravel in slow, imperceptible waves. Below, in the shade of gnarled shrubs, a colony of leafcutter ants marches in tireless rhythm, tiny legs carrying green banners overhead, destined for underground chambers where fungi, fed on chewed vegetation, will in turn nourish the colony. These ants are farmers, architects, and decomposers, reshaping the land grain by grain. Their work aerates the soil, cycles nutrients, creates microhabitats. But even they rely on others. Birds that prey on parasitic flies trailing their lines, trees that provide the soft leaves needed for fungal growth, rains that arrive just in time to cool their burrows. There is no such thing as independence here, only mutual necessity, drawn in 1,000 delicate threads. In a dry stream bed, barely a trickle of moisture remains, but a pair of burrowing owls nest beside it nonetheless. Their territory is modest, their presence quiet. And yet, their impact ripples outward. Their abandoned burrows will one day shelter armadillos or lizards. Their pellets feed scavengers. Their calls shape the behavior of nearby rodents, shifting the pulse of foraging patterns that, in turn, affect seed distribution. Every act, no matter how small, becomes part of a larger choreography. The Cerrado breathes through these patterns, remembers itself through them. Even the Jaguar, top predator and phantom of dusk, depends on the unseen labor of countless others. Its prey must have enough to eat. The grasses must grow thick enough to hide its approach. The scent trails it follows must remain unbroken across terrain, untouched by development. It is easy to admire the Jaguar's power, its grace, but its survival is not sovereign. It is scaffolded by the mice, the insects, the trees, the fungi, and the rains. Without them, the hunter loses its path. Without the path, it starves. And yet, so much of this web is invisible to the untrained eye. Who sees the microbe that allows the Cerrado tree's roots to fix nitrogen in poor soil? Who notices the nocturnal pollination of the pecky fruit by bats that flit between shadows, unseen but essential? Who marks the moment when a lizard's basking shifts a flowering cycle by an hour, which then alters the availability of nectar for a passing bee? These are not the grand spectacles of wildlife documentaries, but they are the heartbeat of the ecosystem, the quiet hinges upon which all life here turns. In this network, even decay becomes a gift. A fallen tree is not a ruin, it is a promise. It offers food for termites, shelter for small mammals, nutrients for fungi, anchors for vines. Over years, it disintegrates not into nothingness, but into everything, a transformation that sustains dozens of lives. There is a grace to this process, a humility in how the Cerrado recycles loss into fertility, fracture into form. But this interdependence is also a vulnerability. When cattle compact the soil, it is not just the grass that suffers, but the ants who cannot dig, the fungi who cannot spread, the birds who cannot nest. When pesticide drifts across fields, it kills not just the locust, but the bee. Not just the pest, but the pollinator. When a single species vanishes, the consequences are rarely immediate, but they are cumulative, like hairline cracks in stone that one day shatter under weight. Scientists call this a keystone dynamic. Remove the right stone, and the arch collapses. The Cerrado is full of such stone species that hold more influence than their size suggests, relationships that carry more meaning than their visibility reveals. The threat is not just extinction, but erosion, a gradual thinning of connection, until the whole system begins to unravel. And still, the Cerrado offers hope, not because it is invincible, but because it has evolved through complexity. In recent years, conservationists have mapped corridors between fragmented patches, allowing animals to move, to mate, to maintain genetic diversity. Farmers have begun planting native grasses that regenerate soil and restore balance. Local communities, long marginalized, are being recognized for their stewardship guardians not just of tradition, but of function. These are not miracles, but corrections, proof that the web can still be mended if the right hands weave it. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson the Cerrado offers. That strength lies not in dominance, but in relationship. That no creature survives alone. That survival itself is a conversation, a call and response between species, elements, and time. And that if we are to preserve this place, we must learn to listen not just to the jaguar's roar, but to the ant's footfall, the root's growth, the silence between wing beats. because the web that binds the Cerrado binds us all, whether we see it or not. When the fires have passed and the smoke curls upward into the reddened sky like the last breath of a dream, the Cerrado reveals its most haunting truth, not in the scorched trunks or the cracked soil, but in the silence that follows. It is a silence that stretches across valleys and ridgelines, across time itself, a silence that remembers. Here, beauty and fragility do not sit on opposite ends of a spectrum. They are one and the same. To behold this biome in its full splendor is to recognize how easily it could vanish. The golden hour bathes the landscape in a honeyed light, softening the contours of the harsh terrain, turning even the dust into a glittering veil. A giant anteater, solitary and stately, ambles through the field, its gait deliberate, almost ceremonial. Its claws curl protectively beneath its forelimbs, and its elongated snout sways gently as it sniffs the earth. Each step it takes is the echo of ancient lineage, a survivor not of strength, but of specialization. But behind this moment of grace is a sobering truth. With grasslands cleared for monoculture, with fires no longer seasonal but constant, even creatures as enduring as this face a narrowing future. A short distance away, in the shadow of a burning tree from weeks past, sprouts a tiny candia seedling, its stem no thicker than a pencil lead, its leaves trembling with the smallest breeze. It grows not in defiance of fire, but because of it. This tree, like many in the Cerrado, has learned to wait, storing energy in underground roots, biding its time until the fire cleanses the surface and makes room for rebirth. Yet even fire-adapted species have limits. As the frequency of burns increases beyond what evolution ever prepared for, even these seeds falter exhausted, misaligned with the tempo of the land. And the tempo is everything. The Cerrado does not burst forth like a rainforest. It builds slowly, intricately, like a symphony unfolding note by note. One season releases seeds, another swells them with rain. One wind scatters pollen, another lures pollinators from distant fields. To rush this process, to interrupt its cadence, is to silence the music before it reaches its crescendo. The maned wolf stands on a ridgeline at dusk, its long legs casting surreal shadows against the grass. It pauses, ears pivoting in all directions, its body held in poised stillness. Then it lets out a low, haunting call, a foghorn note that drifts across the savannah like a question with no answer. The call is not a declaration of power, but of presence. It says, "I am here." I remain. But for how long? Underneath this call lies another, quieter one. The alarm cry of disappearing frogs, whose wetlands are vanishing under soy plantations. The silence where once buzzed the chorus of bees who pollinated flowering shrubs. The rustle of small mammals forced to migrate across barren pastures where no cover remains. These are the sounds of a system dimming, not extinguished, not yet, but flickering. And if beauty lies in the completeness of life's patterns, then the loss of even one thread unravels far more than it seems. And still, despite everything, life presses on. A pair of scarlet macaws wheels overhead, flashing like living embers against the pale blue sky. A tamandua climbs a corky tree, its curved claws gripping bark, softened by rain. Tiny lichens recolonize a burned stone, painting it with pale green lace. These are not grand recoveries. They are whispers, hints, promises. They say, even now, even still, there is something worth saving. Science gives us numbers. 5% of original cover remains. Over 4,800 endemic species call this place home. The Cerrado absorbs nearly 13% of South America's carbon emissions. But numbers cannot carry the smell of dry grass after rain, or the silence before a jaguar's pounce, or the strange serenity of a midnight lightning storm blooming over the horizon. For that, we must look, truly look. The Cerrado is not just a biome, it is a library written in bark and claw, in beak and burrow. It holds the wisdom of droughts endured, of alliances forged in the soil, of ancestors remembered in migration patterns and blooming cycles. Its stories do not unfold in pages, but in petals, not in ink, but in ashes and seed. So what does it mean to protect this place? It means more than fencing off parcels of land or counting endangered species. It means understanding that beauty is not a luxury, but a signal, a sign that life is still working, that systems are still intact. It means seeing the Jaguar not as an icon, but as a test. If it thrives, the system does. If it falters, so do we. In every ant trail, every blossom, every silent drift of wind, there is a reminder. This world was not made for us alone. And the Cerrado, in all its intricate, fire-forged wonder, asks not for dominion, but for humility. It offers not comfort, but clarity. Because when the final fire has burned, and the last echo of a maned wolf's call fades into dusk, what will remain is not our power to shape the land, but our willingness to listen to it. In a world increasingly shaped by speed, noise, and distraction, the Cerrado remains one of Earth's quiet resistances, a vast, breathing reminder that true resilience whispers more often than it roars. Here, survival is not claimed by domination, but earned through balance, through cooperation, patience, and the slow dance of evolution, responding to fire, drought, and renewal. But the balance is tipping. With each hectare cleared, with each species lost to indifference, the system stutters. And yet, not all is gone. The rhythms are still there, faint, flickering, but real. They pulse in the rustle of golden grass, in the scent of scorched bark and rain-soaked stone. They wait for us to notice. Because nature thrives when left to be wild. Perhaps all we need is to step back and learn.
Sage plant. Feel how the leaves are different from the others we've seen.